It is Friday, August 23rd. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Firewalk episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The August PS Plus Essential lineup, still live on PSN. Make sure you claim those games. Also, PS Plus Extra and Premium, the August lineup is now live on PSN as well, and that also means we now have some games that are going to be exiting the game catalog in about a month's time. So you have about 30 days left to play these games, which are fairly high profile. 12 exits, that being Alien Isolation, Cloudpunk, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, Horizon Forbidden West, a big AAA PlayStation Studios title, also Marvel's Midnight Suns, Nier Replicant, Spiritfarer, and multiple Star Ocean games that all went in at the same time, and now they're exiting at the same time as well. Star Ocean, of course, can take a long time to get through that franchise, so if you were looking to play those, you're probably going to want to jump back in right now, because, again, only 30 days left. But, yeah, the standout here is easily Forbidden West, if only because it is a big AAA PS Studios title that conceivably does not have to leave the service, and we know that that was the one game that was a bit of an outlier in terms of how Sony added that to the service, because it went in only a year after the launch on PS4 and PlayStation 5, which by Sony standards that was very early, and it was, something where we found out from the Insomniac breach. Even without that breach, we knew that was a very experimental thing from Sony's bottom line, right? We saw that game did influence the a la carte sales, where they fell off a cliff. The game did initially do well that first year, but by the time it is in subscription, there is no reason to pay a la carte for it when you can get that game and then various other titles in the back catalog with a monthly subscription fee. But it is also the kind of game where, because of the nature of how they went about experimenting with that game, perhaps that's why it is exiting the service. Although it does beg the question, and one that I think would probably end up happening at some point, is are we going to see the other, somewhat high-profile PS Studio games in Extra right now be taken out? Because there's always that upside of having this sort of cyclical in and out rotation, despite Sony owning those franchises. We see this a lot, not just in game subscription, but really all subscription services, which is, despite the company owning the actual content and they don't have to take it out, the problem is when you add it, you will see that initial spike in interest of signups for the service to access that content, but then it levels out and you've sort of lost the initial appeal of having that debut in the service. So despite ownership, they do tend to rotate these things in and out to encourage new signups over time, right? And so Sony's already kind of enjoyed that spike from games like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart or Returnal, Miles Morales, right? So it's one of those things where should we expect those games to leave Extra and then, at a certain point they'll go back in as a title that's available again through Extra? I would almost say that's for sure going to happen. I just don't necessarily know when, but Forbidden West, I think, at least in the context of that game, does make sense for why it's now going to be exiting. But anyway, going into our first news story, I wanted to quickly mention this, which is Herc's Adventures, one of the PS1 classics that went into the program recently. That one did not have trophies initially, but that one is now patched for trophies on PS4, PS5, so implicit conversions is still going back to all these prior third-party PS1 and PSP games and throwing in trophies, which is good. Although on the flip side, we have TimeSplitters 1, 2, and Future Perfect that just recently came out, and those do not have trophies. But, based on how they've gone about this so far, I would expect that they'll probably get trophies at some point, so you might want to hold off on playing them. But this is a good segue into another story I want to talk about, which is TimeSplitters itself on PSN. Very weird thing. I'm not sure if anybody else noticed this. I have never seen this happen on PSN the way that this particular franchise is being treated, but it's being packaged on PSN as a singular franchise and one container, one tile on PlayStation Network. What I mean is that depending on where you view TimeSplitters on your console, it may be just a singular tile or 3 separate games, which you would expect that's what should be happening. So if you go into your game library, it does show up as just a single package on PSN. TimeSplitters, 6 items. That would be the PS4, PS5 version for TimeSplitters 1, 2, and Future Perfect. You enter into that menu, and then you select the game that you want to play. So if you want to, say, add the 3 separate games into a game list, you actually can't do that. You have to simply add it as TimeSplitters for the overall franchise. If you search for the game on PSN, it will display the same thing. A single package, TimeSplitters. It won't show you, 2 or Future Perfect if you're trying to search for those games in particular. But on PlayStation Plus, it will be separated properly and show 3 separate tiles. when they're installed on your console, the metadata for all three is the exact same. A singular TimeSplitters 1 logo, and then the background is the same as well. It's very bizarre. There are certain cases where, like, bundle packages on PSN and things like that with the ... menu, can hide certain, variations of content on PSN like that, but I've never seen a franchise sort of debut, or in this case, come back on PS4 5, but to come back on the console and treat the franchise as a single container on PSN, it's a very weird thing, and one that, if it could easily confuse people. This is what I always complain about with, PS5's UI. I mean, I do like it foundationally, but it has so many odd quirks, and this is another one where the vast majority of, franchises on the storefront are not treated this way. So it's a very weird thing, and I'm just curious as to why they did that with this game. Moving on to our next news story, Sony is making some not so good changes to PlayStation Stars, their rewards program for PlayStation consoles. A lot of you probably already know about this because they sent out emails yesterday letting you know that they're making some changes come October 24th, so this is coming up very soon, where you have to accept new terms to be able to earn points, and those points are now going to expire in a year from when you earn them instead of 24 months, so they're cutting that in half. And then the other angle of this is that they're no longer qualifying subscriptions on PSN as a qualifying purchase to earn points. So PlayStation Plus, for an example, can no longer earn you any points on PlayStation Stars. So those are the two big changes, which is, of course, greedy. It's really annoying with subscription, at least, because, at least with expiry dates, it's like, okay, you can't bank points anymore if maybe you don't buy a whole lot on PSN, but you can cash out at $5. So just, do that at your earliest convenience. That's not too bad. But subscription, it's like, okay, PS Plus Extra and Premium is a lot of money nowadays. The small silver lining was you were earning points on that, and now they're not even letting you do that, which is pretty bogus. And it's like we've had Stars for not that long at all, so it seems like, based on some initial data that Sony's gathered from the first year or so of the service, however long it's been, and now they're making adjustments to where they can really squeeze out the good margins for them, especially because, again, like, this is what I was saying before, like, it's still beneficial to everybody involved. It's still great that we have rewards versus never having them in the first place, so it's always additional, but it does typically encourage more spending on PSN. So now it's something where we have the service, it encourages more spending because you want to accumulate points and sometimes use your points on digital goods instead of actual monetary value on PSN, which is insane, but if you want to do that, go ahead. But there's that, and now it's now they're trying to lower the rewards that you actually get on average across all users. So not exactly a surprising thing for something like Sony to do, but that's going into effect October 24th. Next up, let's talk about Team Asobi's Astro bot, which is coming out very soon. It does seem like this year is going by very quickly, but today we had Concord come out, full launch, Black Myth Wukong, so a lot of big heavy hitters finally being released, and with Astrobot at least, it's something where the game is like nearly 2 weeks away, and that is also something where we're now having some leaks pop up online, just like a list of the VIP bots in the game, some full levels, and I believe a full boss fight is out there as well. Now, Astrobot, not really the kind of game where you say have to avoid leaks in the same manner as, say, A Last of Us Part 2, where you want to not hear about big plot points and this narrative storyline that's going on. But still, maybe if you want to be wary of those things, to not be spoiled about some of the cool new VIP bots in the game, or some more footage of the title, then I would say maybe just be on the lookout. But otherwise, there is more footage out there. We're not going to go over it, considering the game's just about to come out anyway. So if you're interested, you can go find it. If not, then probably want to avoid it up until the game comes out next month. Now, as I just mentioned, Concord did come out today, the full launch. It was in early access 3 days ago, but now it's finally available for everyone on PlayStation 5 and PC, which is still something where it's a PlayStation Studios game from Firewalk, the recently acquired studio. So congratulations to those at Firewalk for finally shipping this game, especially knowing that this game was in the oven for a very long time. We're hearing from the lead character designer, John Wisniewski, on Twitter, where they talk about how this game has been in development for around 8 years, and they were there for almost 5 of them, which, The discussion around this tweet obviously is that the game has been in development for such a long time, and there's been a lot of consternation around this game in particular for various X, Y, and Z reasons, which we've already said time and time again. But, you know, it's a live service title, and it's a AAA one that, of course, it is going to take a long time to get out the door. It does give us a good idea of exactly how long the game, well, it gives us an exact timeline, which is in development since 2016. We know Herman Hulse played the game in 2018, so it was in a far long enough stage to where they were clearly seeking more capital, more investment to get that game off the ground. We know games take a long time, a very long time to make nowadays anyway, so that's always the strange thing about these massive multi-million-dollar bets, right? 2016 with a lot of, you know, free-to-play live service hero shooter type games being on the market and doing extremely well. And it's like, okay, a lot of studios are thinking maybe we can do something similar but carve out our own path and, you know, do it in a different way, or maybe it's a lot more asymmetric, lean into, you know, a different sort of plot line, or just have different principles. Obviously not do a carbon copy. That's not exactly what publishers are looking to do one for one, but you know, by the time you start investing, getting that game out the door, it's 2024, and that might not be the kind of game that the marketplace wants. So it's a vicious thing, obviously, but it does illustrate just how long these things take to come together and finally get out the door. We'll be watching Concord closely as a PlayStation Studios live service game, another live service game in Sony's huge investment in that space, and see how this ends up doing. We still imagine that it's not going to debut strong, but long term, you never know. Maybe it can build up an audience. We'll watch and see. Moving on to the PlayStation 5 console-timed exclusive Silent Hill 2, where a lot of stuff came out about this game recently. So we got a brand new story trailer, but also hands-on impressions from various outlets, that being IGN, GameSpot, Polygon, Push Square, a few other places giving us some impressions, and also we got like 26 minutes of pure uncut gameplay, which is exactly what you want for this kind of game, where there has been a lot of concern in the moment-to-moment gameplay, and also just how Bloober Team went about handling certain gameplay mechanics and just the look and feel of the game. And really, it seems like the general sentiment has been very positive, not just from the hands-on impressions, but the sentiment I am seeing there is that there are some areas in the game that are indeed changed and expanded, like your first combat sequence or the walk you go on from the parking lot and then into Silent Hill. But it does sound like the game's high-stakes encounters are very much intact, and it's not some weird modernized way where it's a lot more action-oriented, which I think a lot of people were very concerned with. But with a new camera perspective, there's like a better sense of direction and almost intimacy with the environment. And we can see from like even the initial sequence in the bathroom, it is like way closer to what the original game had in terms of that sort of air and that feel with the darkness being cast over James' face. The uncut gameplay, I think, is really the thing that's doing it here. I'm seeing so many people watch that now and going, yeah, I think this is going to turn out okay, which that's the best result you can ask for, right? I mean, it's always like not a fun thing to sort of hope for the downfall of a particular project, or, you know, the hard work that a studio is doing for a game. But in fairness, there has been a lot of doubt on if Bloober Team was the right studio to go about handling such a beloved, you know, entry in a franchise. This is shaping up quite nicely, even for somebody like me, where I'm not a huge like Silent Hill fan or cult fanatic. I'm loving what they're doing with this thing now. I wasn't entirely sold, but that uncut gameplay really is starting to paint the game in a better direction that I think respects the source material in a way that is just balancing that fine line of respecting the material, but also having to modernize certain aspects of the game to feel new, fresh, and also playable to a modern audience. All right, moving on to Black Myth Wukong, a very big recent release, one of the biggest of 2024 so far. We see on Steam that it's now the biggest single-player debut on the platform, where it had like 2.3 million concurrent users, which is insane in the first 24 hours. And this game also being available on PlayStation 5. It's the only console version available right now, as we saw from Game Science on their site, where they did outline why the Series SX versions are delayed right now, which they, again, cited it was some kind of, you know, optimization issue. They want to make sure that the game or that version of those games is up to snuff, which we all surmised, oh, that's probably the Series S version being the bottleneck, which we can now maybe understand that more so when we look at the PlayStation 5 version and see that it's having a lot of performance issues. It's not unplayable by any stretch, but we can see between all three modes, that being the quality, balanced, and performance, there's just a number of frame dips that are noticeable enough. So Digital Foundry did their thing and did a lot of coverage on that game, so you can get into finer detail about what are some of the issues with what's going on with the console version. It's not, again, unplayable, but clearly it's not up to the standards that Game Science would probably want it to be at, and that maybe is more illustrative of why they were not sending out PlayStation 5 review code, because that is something we saw right up until the game came out. They were only sending out PC review code, which if you've got a capable system, then the game looks absolutely nutty. So that really, I think, kind of circles back around to what's going on with the PS5 version, and also in a way Series S next as well, because we had Microsoft send out the same statement again to Forbes, where, if you remember, they said we can't comment on deals made by our competing platforms or our competitors, that being Sony in this case. So at the time, they were implying that Sony has some kind of exclusivity agreement. And so they sent that statement again to Forbes recently as the reason why Series S and X versions are not available for this game just yet. But things have not changed in that, if this were a timed exclusive, it would be in plain view, broad daylight. Sony does not ever hide these things. They would have, marketing rights. They would, be really shouting that game from the rooftops. A lot of marketing material saying PlayStation 5 exclusive, timed exclusive. There would always be little asterisks on any sort of press materials letting us know how long it is a timed exclusive. They always do this. So very weird for Microsoft to send out the same statement, but it is something where it's probably still an issue with the Series S version. Now, the other thing we can say, though, is that this game has been very beneficial, though, to PlayStation hardware, because this game saw a huge, or rather, this game caused PlayStation 5 to see a huge sales spike in China, and we're also hearing from an analyst from Nico Partners that PS5 is now selling 2 times faster than PlayStation 4. Now, that's all they say. I believe that's on a launch-aligned basis, because we can actually go back to 2014. That was when the console ban was lifted in China. So in theory, 10 years ago, Sony has been investing in what is a very untapped market as far as consoles go. And consoles are still very niche. I mean, that was 10 years ago. And really, they're only doing 2 times faster at the rate of sale versus PS4. China's still primarily PC and mobile, but it's still the kind of ground where Sony sees a lot of upside. And so 2 times better is certainly better than what they were doing with PlayStation 4. But I expect Sony's still going to heavily invest in most of the Asia territory, and that is going to include China. Moving on to Hideo Kojima and Death Stranding 2. This past week, Kojima did a number of teasing like he normally does, in the same manner for DS2, where it's a bunch of these promo images saying, "Who am I?" with the silhouette of what we assume is somebody in the game. So there's 2 new silhouettes that are not revealed just yet. So he put up a few of those images this past week, right up until confirming a new stage presentation at TGS on September 29th. So there's some kind of Death Stranding 2 panel happening the last day of TGS. So a number of guests are going to be on the panel talking about the game. And that's very fresh news, by the way, as I film this. So not entirely sure what we should expect from that, but it does coincide with Sony also confirming their booth at TGS, where we knew they would be exhibiting at TGS again after being gone for so many years. And they are going to be exhibiting Astrobot and also Monster Hunter Wilds, which that game obviously is really smart on Sony's end to partner up with that game. It's playable right now at Gamescom, and the lines for that game are apparently like the longest. It takes hours to line up and try and get some hands-on time for that game. There's a ton of interest in Monster Hunter, so a lot of people very excited for that game. So they're exhibiting that and Astrobot at TGS alongside this panel. Now, this does beg the question of where does a possible State of Player showcase slot into this time frame, if at all, because that was the one, sort of, I think, curiosity we had knowing that they would be back at TGS this year, is like, okay, you're going back to TGS. Why is that? Because you're going to, announce things before TGS that you are then going to bring to that show. They've already outlined what they're bringing, so they're not showing their hand on what they may or may not announce in the very short term, being, earlier mid-September, because TGS is late September, which, TGS was never a big stage to, elaborate further or make big announcements on the existing PlayStation business. It's very much a targeted event for that marketplace. So it's not like TGS is like a very awkward spot. If anything, maybe it's more telling on where we'll see more of Death Stranding 2, which will probably happen before TGS, you have to imagine. That being a new trailer, that could be a part of, say, a state of play or a showcase. But that still sort of, gets a little muddy with how they will announce or show off PlayStation 5 Pro. I still fully expect it's going to follow a similar timeline to PS4 Pro, in certainly the same manner, where it's its own presentation. It doesn't have game announcements in that presentation, but it's really a hardware-focused show with Mark Cerny, and then separately you do game announcements or something with a state of play or a showcase, whatever the company plans on doing. But I think the sort of safe thing to say is that we'll probably see more DS2 very soon. That's like the one bare minimum thing we can say, but in theory, we should be having some major announcements pop up sooner rather than later. All right, moving on to Geoff Keighley's Gamescom opening night live. The presentation was this past week, about 2 hours long, and normally Sony does like to give Geoff Keighley something, although Gamescom is not always a surefire thing, and this year that was the case. They did not show up, no SA announcements directly, but we still, of course, have various PS4, PS5 games to go over, so we do like to recap the entire thing. So if you did not see the entire 2-hour event, then here's all the relevant PS4 and PS5 announcements in order of appearance. So first up is Borderlands 4. That was announced for PlayStation 5 coming next year. Goat Simulator Remastered coming to PS5 in 2025 as well. I loved the trailer for that one. It was really goofy, typical Goat Simulator fashion. Persona 3 Reload's expansion is coming September 10th, and there's also going to be Joker showing up in there as well as an enemy, so very cool to see that. Dying Light the Beast is a new standalone Dying Light game coming to PlayStation 5 as well. King of Meat from Amazon Games. This is a co-op hack and slash game with user-generated content coming to PlayStation 5. Don't Nod's Lost Records Blood and Rage got a gameplay trailer and also a confirmed release date where the game is split into 2 parts. So part 1 is February 18th, 2025. Part 2 is March 18th. Arc Raiders got a new trailer as well, coming to PS5 next year, 2025. Predecessor, the free-to-play MOBA shooter, officially dropped during the show, so it's available right now on PS4, PS5. That would be version 1.0 of that game now. Path of Exile 2 got a new trailer, confirming early access will begin on November 15th. That one is also for PS5. The Dune Awakening Survival MMO also got a gameplay trailer. The console versions will get a release date announcement later down the road. Tarsier Studios, the team behind Little Nightmares 1 and 2, have revealed Reanimal, a brand new horror IP coming to PS5, which looks very similar to Little Nightmares, so not too surprising there. Monster Hunter Wilds, though, that got a new gameplay trailer, and that's the one that's playable at Gamescom, so again, a lot of people lined up to play that game. Fatal Fury City of the Wolves is next. That was confirmed for April 24th, 2025 on PS4 and PlayStation 5. Civilization 7 got a gameplay reveal coming February 11th, 2025 for PS4 and PS5. Marvel Rivals got a confirmed date as well. That's coming December 6th this year, and all the heroes are going to be unlocked at launch and post-launch as well. Then moving on to a new Amazon show that was announced called Secret Level. That's coming December 10th. We'll talk more about that later in the show as a separate news story. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 got a brand new gameplay trailer, and that's also shaping up quite nicely. That game looks gigantic. Hurdling was announced. That's a new game from the creators of Far Changing Tides. That's coming to consoles next year. Peter Molyneux took the stage with his new game, Masters of Albion, which is a new management god sim. It's available to wishlist right now on Steam, but Peter did say he wanted to return to PC and console, so a PS5 version, while it's not named, is probably a safe bet here. Unknown 9 Awakening now has a release date. Finally, that's coming October 18th for both PS4 and PS5. Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred showed off the mercenary companions that can accompany players. That's slated for October 8th. And then the first Berserker Kazan, the hardcore action RPG, announced a closed beta test on PS5 and Xbox Series X. That's That's going to run from October 11th to the 20th. There's a very Animal Crossing-like game, Floatopia, that's coming next year. That was announced for PS5. Indiana Jones: The Great Circle got a new gameplay trailer as well, showing off more of how that game is shaping up, and this is officially PlayStation news because a PS5 version is confirmed for spring 2025, so after the Xbox and PC versions, which are coming December 9th. Then, to end the show off, Mafia: The Old Country was announced with a teaser, and more info is coming December of this year. So I think we can just segue nicely into our next news story, which is Indiana Jones on PS5, because that was going into our last week's episode about how we were expecting some kind of new Xbox Game Studios announcement this week during Gamescom, and here is the game. What's funny is that right before Gamescom, we did hear it was going to be this game from Nate the Hate, so he did put that out there, but there was so much conversation even prior to Nate where it was a matter of like, oh, maybe it's Forza Horizon, maybe it's Flight Simulator, maybe it's other game X, Y, and Z, because there's a lot of names getting thrown out there, but it is this game, which we're hearing from Tom Warren writing for The Verge that even though the timeline right now says spring 2025, it sounds like they're trying to shoot for April, so that's the exact month that we can probably expect this game coming out. And as part of Xbox's own Gamescom coverage, we did have Sarah Bond and Phil Spencer on there talking about the event and getting asked a number of questions about the show. And so on the topic of Indiana Jones and it going to PS5, Phil gave a very interesting quote here where he says, "What I see when I look is that our franchises are getting stronger. Our Xbox console players are as high this year as they've ever been. So I look at it and I say, okay, our player numbers are going up for the console platform. Our franchises are as strong as they've ever been. And we run a business." Like, it's definitely true inside of Microsoft that the bar is high for us in terms of the delivery that we have to give back to the company. We get a level of support from the company that's just amazing in what we are able to go and do. I think as an industry right now, there's a lot of pressure. It's been growing for a long time, and now people are looking for new ways to grow. I think for us as players and as fans, we just have to anticipate there's going to be more change in how some of the traditional ways games were built and distributed. That's going to change for all of us, but the end result has to be better games that more people can play. If we're not focused on that, then we're focused on the wrong thing. So a lot to unpack on that one. What we can say right off the top is that with this game, while it does appear as though Microsoft is maybe trying to do some kind of exclusive window, so it's like, oh, play it first on Game Pass, Xbox consoles, PC, then get it later on PlayStation. Some are looking at the release dates and wondering, okay, they're close enough as is, why even bother delaying PS5? And I would say it's probably because they have to ship and actually make the PlayStation 5 version. That game is already working on a bit of a delay because what we know from the entire FTC documents, the CMA documents that came out, this was something that was out there in plain view, which was when Microsoft acquired Bethesda, they originally amended their deal with Disney to exclude the PlayStation 5 version. That game was going to be multi-plat, then they were acquired, and now the game became an Xbox console exclusive because that was still something where at the time they were planning on doing the traditional console model. This is more illustrative, again, of their more recent corporate pressure from the very top, that being the CTO, the CEO at the parent organization, Microsoft, to see bigger returns from this division, which has historically been doing not that well in recent quarters and really the past 2 years or so. I mean, it's more illustrative of how this was very likely a more recent decision, a more recent U-turn of now shipping games on competing platforms, that being PlayStation. We actually know from Jez Corden, apparently sources close to him have told him that Sea of Thieves on PS5 has sold over 1 million copies already, which if you don't even count all the extra content items you can buy for that game, that's already $40 million in revenue. Another point to bring up is that with Doom: The Dark Ages, which is already confirmed multi-plat day and date across all platforms, that game probably did not see much of a delay for the PlayStation 5 version, if at all, when they were planning on shipping and putting that game out there, right? Which that game could have very well still fit in the case-by-case basis language that they had at the time. But yeah, it seems clear this game is maybe in a situation where they would ship it sooner if they could, but there was a bit of a gap there on putting down the PS5 version internally, focusing on the other ones, and then here we are today. But to Phil's point, right, talking about the changing industry, it's still, I think, very important to highlight that this is a problem they're facing. Now, full stop, I mean, all public companies want to, they all have that pressure to grow and see bigger returns for shareholders, and that's no different from Sony. It's just a matter of how Sony is in a position where they still don't necessarily have to ship on a competing platform like Xbox. They're still doing it in a way where it's more PC releases, embracing the PC platform, building a proper PlayStation Studios mobile division to finally advance in mobile in a more meaningful way, expanding their IP and their properties by doing theme park rides and things like that, right? So they're expanding and still looking for ways to grow. They don't have to do it in the same way Microsoft is doing it. So there is a lot of discussion surrounding if Sony would ever be in that position where even if it's an extra 5-10% of revenue by shipping on Xbox consoles, if it's still revenue that they're leaving on the table, maybe they'll eventually go out there and do that. I would not expect that to happen anytime soon, and certainly I would say that would not happen for Nintendo anytime soon either. They're probably much further out if there's ever some sort of timeline where they start doing that to see bigger returns. But their company culture is also a lot different from, say, Sony and certainly Microsoft's. But it's also something that is, I think, still silly in a way, where he says the market, like the industry saw a lot of growth, and now there's pressure to find more of that. Again, like, consoles never really grew. What grew was the revenue which was a byproduct of the PlayStation Store, the Xbox Network, free-to-play games, microtransactions. There's no doubt there's been growth. There's been growth by extracting more money out of the same users. Consoles have not grown for like 25, 30 something years if we're simply talking how many consoles are shipped in any given cycle. So the issue Microsoft is facing is that finite number. They don't really have a very big slice of it this time around. So there's a lot of pressure from Microsoft's point of view to start doing things like this. Sony is not there, not yet. I'm not sure if we should use the word yet, but it's still it's a rapid changing environment, and Sony is playing the game, but they're playing it on PC and mobile. Now, going back to the one Gamescom announcement about that Amazon TV series called Secret Level, this is very interesting. So it's this new anthology series based on video game IP, basically. There's going to be 15 episodes. It's being produced by Tim Miller, the director of Deadpool, and also one of the founders for Blur Studio, which has been in the business for a very long time. They're primarily well known for doing a lot of the very high production video game trailers and cinematics. And so for the 15 episodes on this like highly inspired video game anthology series, they're going to be covering games like Armored Core, Crossfire, Dungeons and Dragons, Honor of Kings, Mega Man, Pac-Man, Sifu's in there, Concord is also in there, so I guess Concord is getting its own episode. But there's also an episode that's just straight up PlayStation. Like, I guess it's supposed to highlight various PlayStation Studio titles. So there's going to be like a lot of cinematics for some sort of like PlayStation themed episode. It's a really interesting concept, to be honest, because it's I guess a better way to package maybe a tighter story into I don't know what the planned runtime is, like maybe 30-40 minutes. Maybe they can be like upwards of like 50 minutes to an hour or something if the production value is like meant to be that high for a very self-contained thing. But I think that's a very interesting concept that like clearly works in many other applications. So this, at first I'm like, oh, a TV show, who cares? But when you lay it out like that, I think I'm a lot more interested. So especially knowing that there's at least 2 PlayStation-themed episodes. So I'd love to see where that ends up going. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was looking at more used PS2 memory cards. My god, that is so fun. I wasn't planning on that being like a multiple entry series, but man, it's so fun going back with PS2. So I don't know, we might do another one of those down the road, but yeah, we had another one of those this past Tuesday, and then coming up, we might have separate conversation topics, so maybe one on Sunday, and then I'll see you again on Tuesday. Depends on how it works out with how much time I'll have to get those done and up, because I'm still editing like a lot of other things for hopefully, well, really this would be like next month, but either way, that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Panecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.